Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be going over GDP and GNI, which are measures of national economic activity or national income accounting. So they are very important, and you may hear on the news that your country's GDP has gone up or gone down, and there's this unemployment associated with it, there's inflation, all sorts of stuff, right? So that just shows you how important these things are, especially GDP. You don't hear much about GNI, but you hear a lot about GDP. At least that's what I think from my personal experience. But they're both very important measures of economic activity, and they used to compare countries to see how they're performing against each other. And they have all these ways to compare with each other and all these methods of measuring them. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into what GDP is. So GDP is the total value of all goods and services, right? So that could be cars, airplanes, and notice the word value. So it's not the quantity, right? So we're specifically looking at how much something is worth, because when you think about it, we're trying to measure how well a country is performing economically, right? So if a country produced 1,000 apples and another country produced 1,000 cars, or 100 cars actually, if we just look at the raw quantity of goods and services, well, the country producing the 1,000 apples would actually be considered better off than the country producing the 100 cars, right? Which is so illogical. That's why we use value of all goods and services produced in a country. And also, you need to know that these goods and services are final goods and services, right? Now, what does that final mean? So final means it's not intermediate. So final goods is a good or service is a good or service that's produced for its user and is not a component of another factor, another good or service. So I want you to think about maybe steel, right? Steel is a good that is produced by companies, but it could be used in maybe stainless steel pans, right? So it's an intermediate good. An intermediate good is a good that's used in the production of another good, whereas a final good is the final good that is actually not used as a component of anything else and it's just consumed, right? So think about an apple. Well, actually, no, apples could be made into apple juice. Think about a car, right? A car is a final good because you're not going to use that car to build a truck or anything like that. Anyways, total value of all final goods and services produced in an economy in a given period of time, usually a year, regardless of who owns the factors of production. So the key parts here are the given in a time period. So GDP is not measured across the lifespan of a country, but in a given time span, which is usually you look at annual GDP. And this other part, regardless of who owns factors of production. Now, this is all about. Think about this is all about foreign workers. That's how I like to think it. When I learned it, the teachers would give me examples about foreign workers, and I just think of this as the foreign workers, this foreign workers idea, right? So think about it this way, right? You're living in the US, and someone from, let's say, Serbia came to your country and worked there, right? And then they're giving their labor, which is a factor of production, right? But they are actually a resident of Serbia, not US, right? So you are producing goods or services with their labor. Say they're a mechanic, right? You're building a car, right? So you're having a good or service or repairing a car, which is a service. You have that from someone who does not live in that country, but is actually going towards that country's GDP. So, GDP does not care about who helps to produce or who gives the factors of production to produce those goods or services. It just cares about how much goods or services are produced. It could be someone from Jamaica who's come to give the enterprise where they actually start a firm, right? They could. It doesn't matter. It will still count as the U.S. GDP, even though the person who actually gave the factors of production is not a resident of the US. So those are the important parts of GDP. Now, there's also this other measure which is less popular. It's called GNI, which is gross national income, and GDP is also gross domestic product. I thought everyone would know that. That's why I didn't mention it before. But yeah, GNI is the total income received by all residents of a country, regardless of where the factors of production go. So this really fits in nicely with GDP because it's regardless twice, right? Regardless of where the factors of production go. What this is saying is, let's go back to the work example. The guy in Serbia, right? The Serbian resident who goes to US and works and has the money, let's say they send it home to their family, right? That money counts to the GDI of Serbia because it's income that's actually going back to people in their country, right? Even though the factors of production actually go into a different country, so it's still counted. Like in the Jamaica example, how the Jamaican guy starting a new business, earning that profit, which is the return for enterprise, him getting that income is counted towards Jamaican GNI, even though the factors of production go towards US. So we have this neat little formula to connect GNI and GDP, which is GNI is equal to GDP plus net income from abroad. So net income from abroad, I'm just going to leave some spaces, is the income sent abroad minus income received. Wait, no, sorry. Income received from abroad minus income sent abroad, right? So a country's GNI, let's say the US, right? Let's say US worker goes to China to work, right? So then him receiving or her receiving income, right? Less income from abroad. Let's say they receive $1,000, right? And the Serbian guy receives $900, right? Then going back home. So $900 is going to be income sent abroad, and $1,000 is going to be income from abroad. So it'll be a total net income from abroad of $100, which is added to the GDP. Now you can compare GDP and GNI and see which one's larger, which tells you all about the net income from abroad, because that's the only thing that differs these two. So if GNI is larger than GDP, then there's positive net income from abroad, or the country is receiving more income than it's giving away to another country. Or if GNI is smaller than GDP, then that means that the country is receiving less income from abroad and going away. So this could be a country where lots of workers go away and work in different countries. Now, the ways we measure GDP are nominal and real. You've probably heard about real GDP, but nominal not so much. So the distinction between these is the price used to value these goods and services, right? So back when we said value, value is the monetary value. So back to cars versus apples, right? A car is probably worth, let's say, 50,000 or actually 20,000 US dollars. The apple's worth $1, right? So when you look at the value, you look at the price of the good or service, right? For nominal calculations, you use the current year's prices. So if I used nominal calculation for 2021, I'd be for cars, right? For let's say a Mazda, then um, I would be using the current price of that car in this year. But let's say we have real GDP measurements. So real uses base year prices, right? So a base year is a year that's used for comparison, right? So let's say that we're trying to look at Mazdas and they were produced in 2017, right? And they're still produced in 2021. And I want to check the total GDP or the product, right? The value of all goods and services. So I would be using, if I was making a real calculation of GDP, then I would be going back to the prices in year 2017 and then multiplying that by the quantity of output in 2021 to get the total value of GDP by these cars, right? These Mazda cars. And phenomenal, what I would be doing is I would be multiplying by the um, no, by the current year prices of the 2021 prices of the car to measure the value of total output. Alright, so let's do an example. Actually, I'll make it more concrete that way. Let's say the 2021 price was $100 for the car, right? And in 2017 it was $200, right? And let's say um, in 2021 they produced, let's say they produced a total of 1,000 cars actually, yeah. Here they had a total of 500 cars. Yeah, or actually, there'll be 100 cars. Alright, so there'll be a total of 20,000. Here will be a total of million. I think, oh no, 100,000, sorry. Yeah, so 100,000. Wait, no, actually, let's make it a million. Yeah, so you have a million. Yep. Oh, there we go. So when you look at this just by hand, you see that the current year prices are used to value the. Okay, anyways, I'm going off on a tangent here, but so nominal uses current year prices and real uses base year prices. That's the basic. I might make a video on nominal versus real GDP soon, and that I can give you a better explanation of why we use different ones. Because there's this thing called inflation, which is the gradual increase in price level over time in an economy, right? So when you think about it, if price increases throughout the economy, and output doesn't increase, then your nominal GDP value, because you use the current year prices, will actually go up, and that indicates economic growth. But that's actually not true because it's only due to prices increase, not the output increase, right? Anyways, one of the other things we have is GDP per capita, right? So per capita is just a fancy way of saying divided by the population or per person, right? So you can think of this is important for comparisons because countries have varying populations. Like if you compare India and Australia, the population is so different, but the GDPs could be in India could be higher by, let's say, 5 times as high and than Australia, but the population in India could be 30 times as high. So GDP per capita is actually, and realistically, higher in Australia than it is in India, right? That's why we use those things for comparison, because we need to look at the well-being of each and individual citizen. Anyways, guys, that's my introduction to GDP and GNI. Sorry I went off on a bit of a tangent. I'm still new to the YouTube business. But yeah, if you guys have any recommendations of topics you want me to cover, please let me know, because right now I'm just covering in chronological order. Yeah, thank you for watching. Have a good one.